Numbers, guys, we are headed to Rerun in 2027. This is no joke because right now the numbers I have show that we shall go to Rerun. And briefly, I just want to give you a distribution of numbers across actually about 10 regions that we have in Kenya. Now, if you go to Rift Valley, that includes even Trans Nzoia, where Natembea hails from. We can group it that way. So if you have Rift Valley, just the entire Rift Valley, including Trans Nzoia, you'll have 4.9 million votes. Okay, now from there, let's now go to Western Kenya. Now, Western Kenya, we shall have Busia, Kakamega, Bungoma, and Vihiga. So that region has 2.1 million votes. Then from there, we come to Luo Nyanza. In Luo Nyanza, we have 2.1 again million votes. From there, you come to Gusii region, that is Kisii County and Nyamira. So those two counties have 960,000 votes. And then from there, let's come to Nairobi. Nairobi has 2.4 million votes. Now from Nairobi, let's go to Central Kenya. Now Central Kenya excludes Mount Kenya East. So Central Kenya, we have counties like Kiambu, Nyeri, Murang'a, Nyandarua, and Kirinyaga. So that entire region has 3.1 million votes. And then from there, let's move to Mount Kenya East. Mount Kenya East has 1.3 million votes. From Mount Kenya East, we can go to Eastern, that is Ukambani region, where we have 1.6, or if we round off, we shall have 1.7 million votes. And then from there, let's go to Northeastern. Northeastern region has 626,000 Kenyan votes. Has 626,000. Yeah, 626,000 votes. Then from there, let's go to the coast. The coast has 1.9 million votes. Okay, now when we have all those numbers, there's a way we can distribute. Okay, an apology first. I am doing this live outdoors, and definitely here don't expect any aesthetics, and also expect some little bit of disruption here and there. But what is important, I just want to let you know, not actually you not have these in a graphic representation, but I will do another video where I shall have a proper graphic representation of these numbers. But I want us just to break down these numbers a little bit so that you understand that come 2027 we are likely to be forced into a rerun. Let me just slowly break down. I have the numbers here. I've done my calculation here, and I have the numbers just on a small piece of paper. And from here, you'll understand that we are actually going to a rerun. Even though from what I have, the opposition will win, but will not have, or will not be in a position to meet 50% plus one rule. I did a video on that and how that is calculated. But let's break the numbers down a little bit. And from my calculation, I've broken the numbers in terms of percentage, and also based on regions, and based on how the mood is in the country, and definitely it will go up. But let's break the numbers a little bit. Now, I have the numbers here on a piece of paper. Sorry, guys, my face is a little bit shiny. But remember this, this is not like a normal studio where we have the makeup and everything. So be a little bit understanding. But let's go back to the numbers. Now, I will start with the Rift Valley. As I mentioned, I have the numbers here. Now, when you go to the Rift Valley region, where I said including Trans Nzoia, that region has 4.9 million votes. Now, assuming the voter turnout is 100%. If the voter turnout is 100%, and you give President Ruto 60%, looking at how the current realignment is, if you give President Ruto 60%, you know what President Ruto will have? President Ruto will have 3.9 million votes. On the Gachagua side, if you give them 40%, they will have 992,000 votes. Now, I'm talking that way because, Nakuru is actually in the Rift Valley. So assuming Gashagua's team performs so well in Nakuru, and if you give them 40%, they will definitely just have 992,000 votes. Now from there, we can move to Western Kenya. Now in Western Kenya, people say it is a tight race, which I agree with you, but these are how numbers are. Okay, that region has 2.1 or 2 million votes. But if you give President Ruto 55% of the votes, assuming that, all people will vote, if you give President Ruto 55% and Gachagua team 45%, these are how numbers will look like. Ruto will have 1.2 million votes and Gachagua will have 992. I mean 990. In Luo Nyanza, if you give President Ruto 60% and Gachagua 40%, President Ruto will have 1.2 million votes, while this other team will have 860K. If we go to the coast, where we have the likes of Joho, Emerson Kingi, and also remember this, that the coastal region has always been voting for Raila Odinga. And looking at the current realignment politically, no, that last time, people were going to to Raila's side because of the Kalonzo factor. I agree to some extent, but not in totality. So given that the cost of the coastal region is significantly, pro-Ruto, this is how numbers shall be. Now, that region, if you give Ruto 60%, definitely will end up having 1.7 million votes, while the Gachagua team, because of Lamu, which favors, which will definitely favor Gachagua and also Kalonzo. So the Gachagua Kalonzo team will have 785,000 votes. Then quickly, let's move to Northeastern. Now, Northeastern, okay, they have about 700,000 votes. So that region will vote for President Ruto. We have Eden Duale, and also we have a significant number of people from that part of the country, in government. And looking at the current inroads, Kindiki and President Ruto have been making forays into the region, so that will definitely bear some fruits. So in that case, that region will be pro-government or pro-Ruto. So given that they have 626,000 votes, if you give President Ruto 70% of that vote, President Ruto will have 438,000 votes, while the other side will have 787,000. Now, quickly, let's leave that region. Let's now go to Central Kenya. As I mentioned, Central Kenya excludes, in this case, Central Kenya excludes Mount Kenya East. So Central Kenya alone has 3.1 million votes. That includes Kiambu. And also you have to factor in this fact that Kiambu is sort of cosmopolitan. That's why last time Raila was able to perform well to some extent, given that the region wasn't really pro Raila. But looking at numbers, Raila was able to do well a little bit. So with the Kiambu being cosmopolitan, okay, put aside the current rhetoric. What I know, given looking at my numbers, Ruto will have, let's say, if we give Ruto 15%, definitely it means Ruto will have 767,000 votes. That is like on the lowest, 15%. While this other side will have 2.6 million votes. Okay, so I am concluding. As I mentioned, I have my numbers just on a piece of paper because I'm breaking it down here so that you understand how we shall get into a rerun, because the race is so tight. Now, let's move to Mount Kenya East. There has been a talk that, Mount Kenya region, that includes Central and East, that will definitely vote for Gachagua team, like in totality, like the entire vote will go to Gachagua side. Okay, let's agree that it may not be the case as you people think. Consider this: even previously, when people said Raila is so hated in the region, he still performed. So looking at the current arrangement, where we have Kindiki as deputy president, definitely President Ruto will have something from Mount Kenya East. And remember this, in central Kenya, I gave President Ruto 15%. But here in Mount Kenya East, because of Kindiki and the ongoing projects like Nithi Bridge, and many others, and President Ruto will definitely step up his campaigns. So in that region, I gave President Ruto 45%. If President Ruto has 45%, and remember this, that region has about 1.3 million votes. So if you give President Ruto 45%, definitely you will have 602,000 votes. While this other side will have 736,000 votes. That means 45, 55. You get that? I'm sure you get it. Now, quickly, let's go to the eastern region. That is Kalonzo's backyard, and definitely Kalonzo has a command. He has a tight grip of that region. But also remember this, Ruto will get something, because even in that region, there are people who support President Ruto. So President Ruto will not walk out of that region without something. And at the same time, when you look at, Machakos is a little bit cosmopolitan. So don't just say in totality, President Ruto will not have something from there because we have Kalonzo. President Ruto will definitely perform to some extent. So this is what I gave President Ruto. I gave President Ruto in Eastern, I gave President Ruto 10%. At the lowest, I gave him 10% because here I am going to the lowest possible percentage. So if you give President Ruto 10%, it means President Ruto will just have 169,000 votes, while Kalonzo and his team will take the chunk that comes to 1.5 million votes. Okay? Quickly, let's come to Nairobi. Now, when you look at Nairobi, President Ruto is unlikely to perform, like he will not win the Nairobi vote. He will get votes, but he is unlikely because Nairobi has always been voting for opposition. Because in Nairobi, people rely on their salaries, their households here and there. So in case of any economic shocks, the people that are mostly affected are actually those who live in Nairobi, because these people do not have pieces of land where they at least plant vegetables and all that. So for them, they buy from supermarkets, from malls, and all that. They rely on more, economic situation in the country. The people who are so mad are actually those who live in Nairobi. But when we consider all that, and you also factor in the critical mass, and I mentioned this, the people that matter much in Nairobi is actually the critical mass. Critical mass, majorly the people who live in informal settlement, considering our current demographics and also considering, our economy, the critical mass here are actually people who live in informal settlements. That's a fact, because we don't have, as Kenya, we don't have a strong middle class. You should just remember that. People who live in Muthaiga, Westland, they're not the majority, or Karen, they're not the majority. But the majority of the votes actually come from in informal settlements. And that is the critical mass. And looking at the current, programs that President Ruto has, we have Nyota. That Nyota will definitely benefit people who live in informal settlements, people who live in Madare, Kibra, is it Korogosho? Yeah, the informal settlements. People in that region will definitely benefit. And also looking at affordable housing, areas that are benefiting are actually informal settlements. So those people will consider President Ruto. And also looking at it ethnically, you realize that we still have people from Luo Nyanza living there. We still have people from Western Kenya. So when you look at all that, these are how numbers will play out. In this case, I give President Ruto, because of economy and all that, I give President Ruto 40%, and the Gachagua team 60%. So in that case, it means President Ruto will have 966,000 votes, while this other side will have 1.4 million votes. Guys, I say this, I am actually outside. So sometimes there's sunlight, sometimes there's no sunlight. So that's why you can see those changes. But let's focus on what I am delivering here. So quickly, let's move 1,000 votes. And when you look at the current arrangement, people say because of Matiang'i and Maraga that President Ruto will totally not get something. He will get something. Remember this, just I think it was last weekend where we had people for what last weekend? It should be last weekend, if I can remember. People from the Goose region went to State House. And you see, there was some good mobilization. So when you look at people like Osoro, they went there. So if you look at all that and consider the Maraga factor, the Matiang'i factor, these people being on this other side. So in that case, for Goose region, I gave President Ruto 30%. So that will give us 200,000 votes, guys. So those are the numbers. So in total, based on my calculation, President Ruto will have 10.5 million votes. That translates to 48%. Okay, so meaning in this case, the Gachagua team is winning, but by 49.2%. That translates to 10.8 million. So when you look at all that, nobody is hitting, 50% plus 1. Okay, so if we don't have 50% plus 1, if we don't meet that threshold by even 1 vote, you go to a rerun or to second round election. So in this case, Gachagua is leading by 267,000 votes, but his team hasn't hit, 50% plus 1. So what do we have in this case? We go into a rerun. So guys, that election is so tight. Despite the anti-Ruto rhetoric that we've had in this country, you should remember this: things can always change, and you should also accept the fact that President Ruto is mobilizing. President Ruto has Raila Odinga. So right now, looking at things, if we went into an election today, we shall have a rerun. But now, the election constitutionally, the election will be in 2027. Okay, so meaning any side that will play its cards well can win. And I am putting these numbers when I haven't factored in, having another strong candidate. As I mentioned last time in my previous breakdown, I said this, that when you have someone like Maraga and Okiya Omtatah, when we have such a ticket, they're likely to perform well among one demographic, that is the youth. Okay, they can perform well. So when we have, that third force taking about 300,000 votes, that will definitely take us into a rerun. So even in this case, we are likely to have a rerun. Today, if we went into an election, as things are, we shall have a rerun. And as much as people are mad and all that, remember this: there's so many factors that determine who wins an election, not just emotions and all that. But as it is right now, the race is so tight. But let's wait and see the developments. Any side that will perhaps strategize well, it can win. So as it is, it's not like Ruto will definitely lose, or Gachagua and his team will definitely win. So let's wait and see how these two sides will campaign, and also let's wait and see if we shall have a third force. Guys, my hand is so tired because I am just carrying my phone, because here there's no tripod, there's no what, just the mind and the phone here. So I have to end this live, and I will do another breakdown where I will have at least some graphic representation so that you understand these numbers, because sometimes getting numbers off head and all that, you may not really understand. But I'll do an analysis on this where I will break it down and you'll have a better understanding. Guys, I've done several stories. Go watch. I have different categories. If you check my playlist, you have just another day. We also have no live with Owen. We have breaking news, and I'll be adding more categories as time moves by, because here my keen interest is to make sure I improve my production, and I believe that with the time I'll have money for equipment and all that, and even improve aesthetics, so that we have aesthetics and at the same time we have good content, because on content I'll make sure I deliver the best. So this is or any analysis. So keep it here and I'll be waiting for your feedback. And a video will drop just on the very thing we've discussed right now. Bye. Bye.